Book 3. The Council of the Ages. Chapter 2. Part 2. One day halfway through the journey, tired of playing cards and losing, the half-orc discovered Tanya's secret. The dwarf was in her cabin writing in a book that the half-orc had not seen among his belongings. "Where did you get that book?" Agnorak asked. The truth is that it was a volume that attracted attention for its binding rich in gold and stones that sounded familiar to the half-orc. Tanya closed the book where she was writing when she saw the half-orc enter. He spoke with a certain modesty. "It's a diary. My father gave it to me at birth. I thought your father hated you. He ordered it before I was born and found out that I was cursed by the mark of Abzorim. It is not a normal book." Agnorak, as a good adventurer, had an eye for valuables, if Kush ever sees him. Tanya smiled. The dwarf ran her hand over the cover of the book. A ring that the dwarf had on her ring finger of her right hand flashed and the book disappeared before the eyes of a surprised half-orc. "It's a diary of life." "A diary of life." "It is a tradition of the firstborn of the Gemenegra house. From the moment you are born they give you a ring in which it is associated with a book. It's a diary, in which you write whatever you want. At the end of your days when you die, the ring is removed from your hand and the book is deposited in a library in the Royal Mausoleum of the Black Gems." "But have you been disowned?" Tanya put her hand to the ring. "Once the spell is cast it cannot be overridden. My mother put the ring on me even though my father threw it on the floor in anger when he saw my face." "And you write?" "What am I going to do? Cut my finger. I have enough with being deformed. Besides, it doesn't matter, when I die no one will care what I have written. At least by writing I can be free since no one is going to read it." "Reading?" "Yes, it is a tradition on the Dragon Ridge. When he died, the following year the diaries of the Black Gem Kings were published. I think they probably omit things, but I would be embarrassed if someone read my thoughts. That would only happen if you were queen. It's never going to happen." There was a certain bitterness in the dwarf's words as she slammed the ring against the glass of the cabin window. Agnorak left Tanya alone again to lie down on her bed, sleeping, and the hours passed faster. 2 days later they sighted the islands of the Puente Archipelago. It was said that in the past they were the foundations of the gigantic bridges that link the different continents. Now only a vague memory remained. On the 5th day of the crossing they skirted the Cape of Sarmani, going up the coast until they reached the Bay of the Blue Moon, where they saw the port of the city of Panan. They all went out to the deck. None of them had been to this eastern area of Nilish since only those who had elf or human blood were welcome. Only dwarfs were moderately tolerated as long as they came to trade with interesting prices. None of them, except critters, since the Brown Hills were located to the east of the continent and perhaps Gosberg knew these kingdoms of Nilish. The port of Panan was protected by a wall and a large arch through which ships had to pass. But the entrance was protected by an island on which a fort had been built. The elf ship anchored in a port on the island. It was a mandatory stop if they wanted to cross the arch. The elf captain conversed with a number of soldiers. There were no problems and they continued with their march. They went through the arch, which reminded them of the Wall of Tame. Inside the bay there were countless ships anchored in a busy harbor. The bay was entirely occupied by buildings and dwellings crowded side by side and reaching up to the wall. The ship advanced with ease among the other boats heading for the bottom of the bay, where the most important pontoons were located due to the richness of the ornamentation. It was an area for the exclusive use of the elves, totally separate from the rest of the port. The ship carried out the mooring maneuver with total efficiency. A retinue of a dozen elven soldiers in their shining armor were waiting for them. But only one elf knight boarded the boat to meet them. The entire crew lined up to greet him. The elven sailors lined up and squared up in the elf's presence. He advanced slowly. He was tall, his long golden hair reflected the brightness of the sun. Cold blue eyes stood out and observed everything with a certain condescending air typical of someone who knows that he can handle any situation. The captain bowed when the knight reached his height. "It is an honor, my lord." The captain's tone was one of sincere admiration. But the great elf did not even deign to reply and addressed Arion. His voice was soft and calm, but the tone indicated a great condescension towards those present, as if the mere fact of speaking was a gift for everyone's ears. "Arion, I have orders from my lord to escort you to our kingdom. The council awaits your arrival." "We can leave whenever you want," replied the priestess tersely, a little self-conscious about the elf's attitude of superiority. "My name is Zynarak. I am the first knight of the Order of Elen, the herald of Her Majesty." The elf made a slight bow with his gaze. For Zynarak the only one who mattered was Arion. He completely ignored the rest of the occupants of the ship, as if they did not exist. Zynarak disembarked first, Arion later, and then the rest following the priestess. Of course it was not the best presentation. It seemed that only Arion was the one they needed, the rest could sink into the sea and the elves would not care. He even ignored Loranthus, and even though he was a half-elf, it seemed that he was the same filth as the rest. They disembarked, and rather than being escorted they seemed to be prisoners. The truth is that they quickly came into the spotlight among the inhabitants of Panan, such a strange group with a Kendali, 2 Denkis, 2 dwarfs, and 3 orcs. It was too much for inhabitants only accustomed to humans, elves, or at most some dwarfs. But even Arion seemed too exotic to them, her wavy brown hair standing out against the teased hairstyles of the ladies of Panan. The company's clothes too, the color blue attracted a lot of attention in a place where reds, oranges, and yellows were what was fashionable. The elven soldiers made a kind of shield, their mere presence was enough to contain the curious. Even so, the expectation they raised was high.